Hello, everyone, and welcome to TBR's webinar, Hyperconverged, the Players, Impact, and Outlook, with TBR Senior Analyst Christian Perry. I'm Justin Sargent, and I'm hosting today's webinar. Hyperconverged technology is forcing traditional server OEMs to reevaluate their portfolios as data center customers increasingly find use cases for hyperconverged systems. As part of the converged infrastructure market, which TBR projects as a $17.8 billion vendor opportunity, hyperconverged systems will displace piece part infrastructure in data center environments, disrupting the data center market and creating new opportunity for vendors ready for the shift. Before I pass this over to Christian, I'd like to introduce him. Christian Perry is a team lead for data center research, including syndicated reports and projects covering server evolution and adoption, storage architectures, private cloud, infrastructure, virtualization, and related technologies and trends. Prior to joining TBR, Christian worked for nearly 2 decades as a technology journalist. Hundreds of his articles appeared in respected industry enterprise IT publications, including Processor, Baseline, PC Today, and Smart Computing. He served as an editor for eWeek and Kaspersky's SecureView magazine. While working for Ziff Davis, he directed editorial content and production of Convex Ball show publications, which covered the entire range of enterprise technology and had circulation numbers in the hundreds of thousands. And with that, let me hand this over to Christian.
Thank you, Justin, and welcome everyone. So there's a major threat on the horizon to traditional storage arrays and even standalone traditional hardware, and its name is hyperconverged. Before I touch on the emergence of hyperconverged, let me take a step back and look at the challenges customers are facing today with storage. We talk every year to thousands of data center customers, and there's a common thread that we see as we have those discussions. There's too much complexity in their environments. There's complexity everywhere. There's always been a certain level of complexity in these environments, but as the people buying infrastructure today become less IT-centric and more line of business-centric, more focused around projects and particular workloads, IT really gets put in a tough place. Project-driven purchases tend to require IT to really turn on a dime to accommodate the workloads involved in that project. And traditional storage environments aren't really notorious for being agile. So hence the move towards software-defined storage. I had a conversation with Michael Rickberg of Pivot3 earlier this week, and he brought up a good point. Think about the components that exist in a storage ecosystem, or at least the ones required to undertake a software-defined storage initiative. You have the hypervisor, you have storage controllers, you have disk drives and all the various interfaces. You have different storage tiers. You have the interface protocol, the host controller, all of these different pieces. So when you think about all of the hundreds or thousands of potential combinations in a typical environment or across all different environments, you're looking at not just massive complexity and a high level of possible non-compliance, but you might just be facing a do-it-yourself project that just isn't feasible. So enter hyperconverged. Now, there are many flavors of hyperconverged, and I'll talk about them in a bit, but here you have a new breed of storage technology that's designed to get customers up and running quickly with virtualization and with project-specific workloads. We see hyperconverged as the next evolutionary step of traditional converged systems. So where you have that standard base of compute, storage, and networking with converged, you have that with hyperconverged too, but you also have storage constructs such as compression, dedupe. You also have, in some cases, a cloud gateway, flash, things that you won't see in typical converged stacks. And all of these put together in a modular approach, you're looking at something that can be scaled a little more easily. So this really isn't a fluke. The players in this space, and there are a lot of them, have designed something here that we feel is going to revolutionize IT computing as we know it. In turn, we feel this is going to give IT staff that time back to focus on key business initiatives, rather than using a crowbar, that crowbar sort of approach to jam projects into their existing non-flexible IT environments. This is not to say that traditional storage environments are going away. I don't feel they are, at least for the foreseeable future. Even longer range, I don't see that happening, although their value may be diminished over time for a longer or a more broader set of workloads. So even though they will be here for the foreseeable future, they'll slide into a role more fit for mission-critical workloads. So based on our research, we saw much of the initial traction for hyperconverged based around VDI. And now we're seeing these platforms being used for customers for other workloads as well. They're expanding their use cases. I'll talk to that more in a bit, but as the vendor roster for hyperconverged continues to expand, we're starting to see a basic set of standards that compose a typical hyperconverged platform. In many platforms, you'll find the following: a storage controller and array that exist on the same server. So, here note that storage and compute are scaled together, whereas on hyperscale, storage and compute are scaled independently. That's a big difference, especially in larger deployments. We also note that these platforms have really high levels of efficiency for both storage and compute, and high performance on the compute side. I talked about that modular approach. Really, that building block sort of architecture needs to be here for us to consider it hyperconverged. Simplicity and ease of use are paramount to hyperconverged platforms. This is really what's driving one of the primary drivers of the overall movement toward hyperconverged. Again, we know a lot based on our conversations with customers in the data center today. We talk to thousands every year. That they're tired of dealing with all the various complexities and the difficulties in managing their heterogeneous environments, and as a result, they're willing to spend on emerging infrastructure types. And there's, you see this last bullet here, unification of enterprise storage and virtual machines. Yes, so again, that's storage and compute, sort of one in a box, literally one in a box, or two in a box together. That's you really have a foundation built from the ground up, very hypervisor centric, virtualization centric. These platforms are being marketed as several of these platforms are being marketed as an easy way to break into virtualization on a broad base or across a broad base for customers who haven't yet done it. So definitely a lot of opportunity here moving forward. So when we look at the landscape for hyperconverged, there are a lot of players in the field, and that player roster is just growing. One of the reasons that it is growing is because of VMware's presence in the market with EvoRail. That partner roster is growing. There are a lot of pure plays in here as well. And some of the leaders there, NUTANIX, SIMPLIVITY, Scale Computing, Pivot3, Maxta, they continue to grow. This is a market segment that's gaining tremendous traction, and we expect that it will continue to do so, and it's going to do so at the expense of not only traditional storage arrays, but also the traditional converged systems market. And I'll talk to that more later on. We know that customers are looking at alternative infrastructures for a host of reasons, and those reasons just happen to be, of course it's not by accident, but they just happen to be core to the values of hyperconverged platforms: efficiency, simplicity, consistent performance, scalability. There is a lot of hype around the scalability of hyperconverged platforms, and I still think that this needs to be borne out through actual deployments and regular deployments and deployments in larger environments to really prove the scalability of hyperconverged. Remember, we are in the relatively early days of hyperconverged. We're going to see larger deployments, and let's see how well these platforms can indeed scale. But the deployments that are happening now bring with them a host of benefits for the vendors that play in the space. One of those is customer retention. What's interesting about hyperconverged platforms is that there is a certain level of customer lock-in. Now, that's a bit of a dirty word or a dirty phrase when talking about IT infrastructure. However, when customers deploy hyperconverged for a particular workload or for a project or a set of projects, our initial findings are that satisfaction is strong, so there's not a real problem that we see yet with that potential lock-in. Once customers buy hyperconverged and they're sticking with it, we know that potential is there for backlash among certain customers if they made the wrong decision with hyperconverged, because they're choosing a set of architecture here that's rather broad and covering all of the pieces that they need for their IT environment. Whereas if they chose just one converged system or a couple converged systems, there's not quite as much lock-in. So there's good and there's bad there, but for now it is good. These pure plays also have very streamlined business models, and for that reason, in and of itself, we see many of these pure plays as potential acquisition targets for larger OEMs in the server and storage markets. So there's a lot going on here in this market. There's a lot of potential movement moving forward around partnerships and alliances and acquisitions, and we'll be tracking that closely as we move ahead. We're just now launching a stream of research around hyperconverged. It'll be semi-annual, and the first deliverable will publish in June. And in that, we're going to talk exclusively to hyperconverged customers and also data center customers who intend to purchase hyperconverged moving forward. So we regularly conduct research in the converged systems market. We do that on a global basis. We also cover the hyperscale market in the enterprise. And we did this in the U.S. Last year. We're doing that again this year. And when we look at that research, we start to see some synergies between converged systems, traditional converged systems, and hyperscale servers in terms of the workload targets that customers have moving ahead. Because when we look at those workload targets, so virtualized enterprise workloads, whether it's Exchange, SQL Server, or even Oracle database, very high up on the list, not only for customers of converged systems, but also those of hyperscale systems. Database also strong across both types of customers. And you'll see VDI here, and dev and test. VDI, remains a very strong target for hyperconverged moving ahead. But when we looked at the subset of hyperconverged customers in our converged research last year, we did find that they are considering a very broad range of workloads as potential targets on hyperconverged. So we know that they're looking to branch out, beyond traditional hardware, traditional standalone hardware onto hyperconverged, not just for specific workloads, but for workloads that are critical to their business. So that bears watching moving forward. So now I'll touch on some of the primary players in the space and give you our views and insights from our perspective. One of those is NUTANIX. NUTANIX is generally perceived as the market leader of the what we'll call the independent hyperconverged vendors. and it's pretty aggressive with its marketing. Back on November 20th, Howard Ting, who's the SVP of Product Marketing for NUTANIX, told Forbes that NUTANIX beats EMC in many large enterprise accounts. Now, EMC came back and said that it rarely runs into NUTANIX in EMC customer accounts, and when it does, it finds that NUTANIX is targeting companies that are using earlier generation EMC technology. So whatever the truth here, there's no denying that NUTANIX is getting deployments and getting exposure. We see that. We see NUTANIX increasingly appearing in data center environments of the customers that we speak to, and that exposure is only going to increase through that partnership with Dell. So how is NUTANIX succeeding? So like some of its competitors, it pushes the notion that the web scale benefits enjoyed by Google, by Amazon, by Facebook, and other cloud leaders, those benefits can be enjoyed by customers on a much smaller scale. So what's interesting, NUTANIX has former engineers from Google, from Facebook, from LinkedIn to help bolster its expertise around this whole area. And it's not afraid to drive that point home either. NUTANIX places a lot of emphasis on its distributed file system, which it says increases efficiency. And like other platforms, NUTANIX says that its virtual computing platform essentially eliminates the need for storage arrays. Moving forward, we do expect NUTANIX to remain at the forefront of the hyperconverged movement, the hyperconverged market. Moving on to SIMPLIVITY. As the name suggests, simplicity is really at the core of SIMPLIVITY's message. SIMPLIVITY will tell you that you can essentially combine up to a dozen infrastructure functions into one stack. Data efficiency is critical here for SIMPLIVITY's message. So with its OmniQ product, it has inline dedupe and compression, so essentially customers can eliminate redundant read writes, they can reduce their data footprint. We've noted that SIMPLIVITY has a really strong channel strategy, has a really strong channel presence, and like NUTANIX with its partnership with Dell, we think that SIMPLIVITY is going to expand its name, expand its presence, and overall exposure through its partnership with Cisco. That Cisco relationship as part of the solution with UCSC, that's interesting because I think for Hyperconverged to really take off, it needs to get exposure in large enterprises. NUTANIX is increasingly doing that. We think that Cisco or SIMPLIVITY will do that as well. Just being attached to the Cisco name really is going to help with presence there, even if the deployments continue to be on the smaller end of the market. So next up is Pivot 3. Pivot 3 is another of what we consider to be one of those hyperconverged independents, if you will. Pivot 3 is all about high storage efficiency and ensuring that the data that the customers need is usable when they need it. Meanwhile, it's also, it commonly messages ensuring high levels of efficiency while ensuring SAN level reliability. So now you start to see that connection and the potential threat to those higher end SAN arrays. Pivot 3 has an interesting take on scaling that we've seen. So where SAN customers often invest in large levels of storage capacity and then find that their storage falls behind as requirements grow, Pivot 3 customers, according to Pivot 3, can stack and scale their appliances on a linear level to match their needs. So these appliances essentially automatically recognize the presence of additional appliances, and then they merge incremental resources into a pool. So Pivot 3 also markets its concept of global hyperconvergence. So instead of dedicating an entire drive per appliance, Pivot 3 basically creates a virtual spare drive across the appliance cluster. What we've noticed with NUTANIX along with Pivot Tree, SIMPLIVITY, Scale Computing, VMWARE, and all the other players in this market, there is really unique innovation happening here on the storage front. This is why we see Hyperconverged as a major disruptor to the storage market and the broader IT infrastructure market. So let's move over to scale. So for smaller organizations, one of the most daunting undertakings that we see is adopting a virtualized environment. You can go the VMware route, like many do, but that can be expensive. There's, that VMware tax that customers talk about. And I say that with air quotes. And you might already have a SAN environment, and you know the complexities involved there. Customers know that, especially if their business is scaling quickly. Scale Computing uses these things to its advantage in its marketing, where it says no more VMware and no more SAN. Like other vendors in the hyperconverged space, Scale Computing is really quick to identify simplicity as a key differentiator against other architecture types. You've heard me talk about simplicity quite a bit here. Yeah, it's a common thread across most hyperconverged platforms. What's interesting with Scale Computing, Scale has a built-in hypervisor based on KVM, and it has built-in automation as well. One thing that's really unique about Scale is, from a business model perspective, is its insistence on limiting partnerships to those absolutely necessary to its customer requirements, rather than building a giant laundry list of partners. I really think that in an era of open computing, where you see a huge range of vendor logos in the spirit of total compatibility, this is an admirable approach. Remember, the key to hyperconvergence is simplicity, but there's a fine line between compatibility for compatibility's sake and a streamlined platform that really does everything you want it to do. I think that Scale Computing is hitting the right balance here. So moving on to VMware, and here you have what's shaping up to be a massive sort of sub-ecosystem within the hyperconverged market. With EvoRail, we see VMware messaging the benefits of a platform built on established technologies and brands such as vSphere, vCenter, and vSAN, and VMware itself. This is similar to what Cisco experienced when it broke into the server market. It already had that massive presence on the switching side, and in turn, that mindshare helped Cisco with its transition to the server market, where it's a huge presence now. VMware has similar mindshare, of course, with virtualization, and it's going to leverage that here with the EvoRail software platform. It uses a similar message of web scale benefits are for everyone, not just for cloud giants. But it naturally differs from some of the other leaders in the space in that it has that large roster of hardware partners. Now, there are others who do this, and I'll touch on those on the next slide. And there are actually pure plays who do this. VMware also is touting streamlined purchase and deployment, which, based on our research in both converged infrastructure and in hyperscale, that's increasingly key to data center purchases. Customers don't want to spend a lot of time in the purchase process or going through that whole ordeal, because they just don't have the resources to do it. They want to be spending that time adding value back to the business. So keep in mind that the need for simplicity, when we're talking about simplicity here, it's not just simplicity around IT systems management. It's also about the purchase process. It's also about, it's about IT in general, infusing simplicity into the overall process of buying to deployment to usage. So looking at the rest of the field in hyperconverged, and keep in mind this isn't the entire field. There's a large roster of other vendors in hyperconverged, and we expect it to grow moving forward. These vendors all take different approaches to hyperconverged. So, for example, Maxta lets you run its technology on any platform you wish. So, according to Maxta, if you deploy Maxta, you don't have to learn anything new. Maxta says it also differentiates because it can scale up or it can scale out. For example, if you need to add just compute nodes, you can do that. If you need only storage, you can add just that. This is actually more similar to hyperscale, so it is indeed differentiated from what we see with some of the other platforms. You take a look on the right with Dell, EMC, Fujitsu, HDS, HP, Inspur, Net1, Supermicro. These are all hardware vendors that have partnered with VMware for Evo Rail. So if there aren't appliances already out there from their vendors, expect that they'll be on the way. We would also expect reference architectures built on Evo Rail, and I would think that these would be really especially attractive to customers who are already familiar with converged reference architectures out there on the market, such as vSpecs, such as FlexPod. This is a market that's evolving quickly, and the competition is strong. So in a data center predictions document that we published earlier this month, we predicted that hyperconverged platforms will not only eat into traditional storage arrays, but also into the sales of those traditional converged systems, pre-engineered, pre-designed systems, and also the reference architectures. But we also predicted that overall we're going to see consolidation in the data center market, continued consolidation. This, hyperconverged, is what I think will be a prime target for acquisitions. Lots of companies here with lots of unique IP. It's a changing storage market. It's a changing overall IT infrastructure market. And to keep up with change, vendors are going to need unique IP. These big solutions vendors are going to need unique IP to remain relevant. And they're going to need a unique approach to survive. This is a different atmosphere now, a different selling atmosphere than it was 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. I think we only need to look at what EMC is doing with its storage business in tandem with VMware to evolve its storage business as a, we look at that as sort of a perfect reflection of all the changes that are happening in this market. Storage vendors need to change their approach to survive, or at least to preserve what they have out there in the market today. Hyperconverged is driving the need to do that. So summing up, I talked a lot about how customer requirements are evolving. They're evolving a lot around simplicity. They just do not have the resources that they would like to have, and as such, they're willing to spend to make up for those resources that they don't have on a human level. Hyperconverged is a good fit here, especially for those organizations that aren't where they want to be with virtualization. For larger organizations that find that scaling out their infrastructure leads to a lot of headaches with both management, configuration, and so on, Hyperconverged also can hit the mark here in terms of delivering a platform that's easy to purchase, easy to deploy, easy to manage, and easy to use. The purchasing atmosphere that's out there today continues to evolve towards these project-type purchases and workload-driven purchases. With that in mind, traditional standalone hardware, it's not going anywhere, but customers are being driven towards purchasing larger sets of infrastructure that's ready to go just after purchase and is purposefully designed for particular workloads or to satisfy a range of workloads or a project based on the workloads that are required for it. So there's not only potential here, there's a lot of opportunity. We will be tracking this very closely. We're doing that now. We will continue to do that this year. And that is all from my end. I'll turn it back over to Justin.
All right. Well, thank you, Christian. And you can follow both Christian and TVR on the Twitter handles listed here. And please check out our pages on SlideShare and YouTube as well for our previous recordings. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you all again next quarter.